my dad and Gabe were classmates at Washington Intermediate School. Gabe was the first chair clarinetist, and my dad was the first chair trumpet player. Later became a drummer. I started playing music at about age 10, and got into my dad's jazz record collection. And so I remember the first time hearing Gabe play, that it was like, wow, he sounds like all the guys on the record. You know, Charlie Parker, Cannonball Adderley, Benny Carter, and the like. So a few years later, Gabe was leading a jam session at a club in Glee called Cat's Eye, and the club was owned by Gabe's friend and Royal Hawaiian Band Combi Cat's Eye. And for some reason, I don't really know how it happened, but I ended up being the drummer at the jam session. I think I was about 16 years old or so. And for me, that was where everything started. You know, I was learning from and playing with the greatest jazz musician in Hawaii. So 3.5 years, as a result of that, Gabe formed a group, and then we played at Cat's Eye. And then we played for about 3.5 years at the Cavalier Restaurant on Kapiolani Boulevard. And then Gabe opened his own club in Waikiki called Gabe's at the Mitsukoshi building. And through all of that, Gabe was kind and nurturing and very gracious. And he encouraged us to bring music in to play. So it was truly collaborative. Gabe was also very funny. I don't think he meant to be funny, but he was pretty hilarious at times. So I'm paraphrasing, but Tim Tsukiyama reminded me of this funny story where Gabe was a true road musician. You know, he learned for years being out on the road with the Stan Kenton Band. And I'm sure back in those days, the amenities were not that great. So if you fast forward years later, he returned to Hawaii, and we ended up on a lot of gigs together, oftentimes traveling to neighbor islands to do corporate gigs and conventions. And Gabe was very well known for always having food on his possession in his pockets. He was really prepared for anything. And so he would always tell us, you know, anybody hungry? And he would reach in his pocket and pull out some kind of snack or sandwich or something. He always had something. And his famous line was, yeah, you gotta take care of the kaka. You know, it's funny. But Tim reminded me of this really funny story that Gabe says regarding snacks. He says, oh yeah, you know, you want some kering? And then we're like, kering, what is that? Yeah. Well, he was referring to kaki mochi or mochi crunch. You know. And I said, what do you call it, kering? He said, that's the sound it makes when you chew on it. So Tim reminded me of that recently. That was hilarious. Also, some musical funny things that happened, and I wasn't witness to this, but it's sort of a famous story about Gabe, and it may have been doing the Bobby Vintage show or something with a big orchestra. And the conductor they rehearsed the piece, and they were asking, he was asking the saxophone section, do you have a part for, you know, is there, I don't know what part. And Gabe's kind of going through the folder, you know, and he doesn't even look up and he goes, no more nothing. And I don't know if it was the same show, but conductors, they rehearse a piece, and he goes, saxophones, there's a saxophone solo in that. Who's gonna play it? And Gabe, again, not even looking up, he goes, Gabe's very talented nephew, David Choi, was in the saxophone section with him. And without looking up, he goes, David will play that. David plays all that rock stuff. He was truly funny. We all remember the lines and rejoice every time we relive those moments. In our local musicians union, we have a quarterly paper, like a newsletter, and their most recent one paid tribute to you. So I'd like to read a few of the tributes from fellow musicians. This is from Byron Yasui. Byron says, Gabe was first and foremost a jazz musician who played with the best. He was respected and loved by so many of his legendary buddies from the Kenton Band and his Hollywood recording studio days. A true humble genius, he was world class, but didn't expect to be treated as such. Rest in peace, Hiroshi. And this is from Benny Reedville, who I played with along with Carl Wakeland and Doug McDonald, with Gabe for a number of years. So Benny says, today I say goodbye to my first musical mentor, Gabe Baltazar, the guy who taught me so much by virtue of putting up with a young punk who knew nothing about jazz, bass playing, swing, or feel. We played mainstream jazz for literally years. Such was the culture of Hawaii at the time. First at Katso, then came a 3-year run at the Cavalier, where we hosted people like Count Basie, Richie Cole, Barney Kessel, Dave Liebman, and lots of others. And for a while at his own club in Waikiki, Gabe's Mitsukoshi building. Luckily, my rhythm section mate was Noel Okimoto, who already was insanely good at it. I don't think so. And others in the band were the brilliant Doug McDonald on guitar and a young Lion on piano, Carl Wakeland. What a time it was, what a lot of fun, a lot of cool horns, even an F sax. A ton of fiery virtuosity from the band himself, and much learning and growing lessons I still use to this day. Safe travels till we meet again. The next is from Gabe's brother, Ron Baltazar. Gabe, Jr., the family would call him, has always been an inspiration. As I studied the clarinet in high school and played professionally, he will always be in my heart and mind forever. Not only as a loving big brother, but a fantastic musician that put Baltazar's name up high as a shining star in heaven. And finally, this is from Alan Watt, a great saxophone. I first heard the name Gabe Baltazar when I was 11 years old. My first saxophone teacher, Ray Sewell, mentioned Gabe to me and said he was not only one of the greatest jazz saxophonists in Hawaii, but also the world. My teacher wasn't exaggerating. When I moved to New York City in 1978, and players out there found out I was from Hawaii, many asked, do you know Gabe Baltazar? I had taken it for granted that Gabe was a major player, but when the New York City players mentioned it, I really took note. I could say with confidence that Gabe was a major influence on me and my career. I had heard Gabe as I grew up in Honolulu during the 70s. I got to see him here in many different venues over the years, but it was one gig that stood out and changed the course of my life. Gabe's gig at the Cavalier restaurant in Honolulu was revelatory. He would have numerous members of the Woodwind family up on the piano and was always talking to the audience about their personalities and quirks, then he would play the living hell out of them. He inspired me to become a woodwind doubler, a jazz player, and a session musician. I'm not delusional and have no illusions about being as great as Gabe. But he put out that possibility not only for me, but for all us young players in Hawaii. It was by his example that he showed us how to be. A lesson with Gabe meant you got called up on stage and had to play with him. He kindly let me solo first, laugh out loud. I know that life has its course for all of us, and I believe it's better to come to terms with it, especially as we age. But even at that, it's still hard to accept that Gabe is no longer with us. Gabe was a bridge to the beginnings of bebop and studio recording and jam sessions with the legends of jazz, Bird, Dizzy, Coltrane, Dolphy, Kenton. These are just a few names I associate with Gabe. You got that energy, felt those experiences through his unbelievable sound. All those experiences summed up when Gabe put air through his horn. Gabe would want us to keep blowing, keep swinging, because he knew it brought joy to the world and it made it, even for a brief moment, a much better place. Aloha oi, Gabe, till we meet again.